Chapter 8. Lovers and Leprechauns. He was older and somewhat attractive, in a dark, mysterious, stranger kind of way. He was very bold, yet deceptively gentle. His name, he said, was Elijah, or just Eli. His energy was very pushy without being dangerous. He extended to the limits of my own energy, wanting connection with me, as he sat down beside me and asked if I knew his brother Noah. Yes, I did know Noah, but not all that well. I found his brother's demeanor at times slightly irritating, yet he was a friend of mine, and we got along okay. So we established that I knew and hung out with Noah on occasion. Their names were seemingly very humorously biblical to me, so I smiled. Eli had interrupted my flow of feeling so very alone, and I felt somehow mildly annoyed with him for doing so. Then, after simple introductions, he came over to me, sat down behind me, and put his arms around me. Cradling me, he asked with a statement, "What would you do if I just held you right now?" What would I do? Well, you are now, aren't you? It's not like you waited for me to answer you. I thought this silently, floored and irritated as I felt his arms around me. In his embrace, I felt my own vulnerability and his, because that is what he needed too. Never mind that it was very forward of him to do it in the first place. I forgave him that because he did nothing inappropriate. He didn't violate any other physical boundary. I couldn't fault him for just holding me, which he did for several minutes, swaying back and forth with me as though I were just a baby in his arms. He was 21, it turns out, nearly 22. How I was so good at attracting these older males, I did not know. First Destin, then Dan, and now Eli. Was I wearing a big, bright neon sign that said, "I need a mature male in my life to love me"? I rested for a second in his arms, realizing once again the strangeness of my life as he asked me, "How does that feel?" Well, there was a loaded question. It felt like a million different things all at once, but the only thing that I could muster as a response was, "Okay." "Just okay?" he asked incredulously. "Yes, just okay. Don't push your luck," I thought, quietly knowing that if he had been inappropriate, the gloves were off. He stopped and went back over to his own personal space, where he had been sitting when he had intruded upon my space. I perceived that he was somewhat hurt, perplexed, and perhaps expected more than just okay as a response from me. Still feeling the edge of vulnerability, that was all that I could pull up out of myself to say. He felt safe to me. I knew that he wouldn't hurt me. We spoke for a few more minutes, as he told me how happy he was that he had met me here alone on this day up on the hill. He said that he had just been driving around Frankfurt and had no plans to be there, but just felt like stopping by and checking it out. Didn't I find that interesting, he wondered? That it was just me waiting for him up on this hill and no one else, when this was the place to hang out? Well, yes, I conceded. I gave him that win. It was definitely an interesting meeting, and we would share this repartee for several months. Spending time with Elijah was a distinctive kind of magical adventure that once again I had to keep a secret from my parents. He would constantly push, gently yet unceasingly, at my energy, wanting connection, and I would allow him in just so much and no further. We met a few weeks later for a second time and began hanging out together as a regular thing, due to an undeniable attraction between us. He had a white convertible Porsche that he thought would impress me, and I did kind of like it because it was fun. He would show up at G's to look for me and park there like a real grown-up, hop out of the chariot of the gods and saunter over, all dressed in white with black boots. I found it a little embarrassing at times when I was there with Joshua, who raised more than one eyebrow at the association with Elijah. Joshua would then summarily lock it away in the vault of feelings that he would not share with anyone except me at some unknown time and date in the future. Joshua's apparent complete lack of interest in a romantic bond between us set the stage for Elijah's extreme interest that bordered on slightly invasive and not quite obsessive. As a result, I began spending more and more time with Elijah. He took me for rides with the top down under the canopy of spring trees glowing with green regency. It would mess up my hair, which was continuing to grow out, but there were times that I didn't care if it did. We shared many rides and walks during the beautiful spring days that followed, spiraling into the majesty of ever-present summer. All the while, he engaged me in what I found to be pointless philosophical conversations with hypothetical reasons why we should be together. He gave me conditional acceptance, not quite unconditional, in the guise of unconditional acceptance. His very deep need to be loved and seen in a particular way as a hero of sorts, the older and wiser of us in his own mind, endeared him to me. I was invited to the weekly role-play game sessions at his place, where he lived with his father and brother, who were almost never home. The lack of his mother anywhere in sight was explained briefly and mysteriously in what I surmised to be an unpleasant divorce. I was playing with the big kids now, and it gave me the opportunity to exercise my own ability to be a grown-up and to be accepted by those around me as such. They were older and of legal age, in some country or another. During one of these occasions, Elijah imbibed some form of cannabis, and we slipped off into another room, away from the fray. He wanted to be intimate with me while simultaneously wanting to be philosophical. I let him explore areas where I previously had not, and he pushed me to reach the culmination of blissful pleasure, which I found completely frustrating because of the way that he would lecture me as though I was his student. I thought that even the goddess Venus herself could not do that under those circumstances because it felt completely unnatural to me to even try. Allowing myself to let go with him would require complete trust on my part, and he did not have my complete trust because of his agenda. As personal as those activities were, there seemed to be an impersonal element to them on his part. Perhaps because he fancied himself to be my teacher or guide, which I found completely annoying. When I finally did allow myself to let go with him, it was in the dark, in a tent at the sandpits. In the cover of darkness, I could not be studied like some kind of mythical creature by his piercing gaze and insatiable curiosity about his own progress trying to tame me. Instead, it was a quiet experience and internally satisfying, without me having to put on a show for him. It was not that he asked me to, but it felt like something that he needed from me. He was pleased either way that I had finally done it, regardless of the dark or need for quiet. It was my own experience of myself with him, not his experience of himself with me as the object of his affection. That is what I felt that he desired. I wasn't there yet. I couldn't be that for him then. He was quite pleased with himself, nonetheless. Regardless of the many differences between us, I felt a kind of genuine fondness sprinkled with affection for him. This potential for deeper love was present, maybe because, in the face of his own lofty views about his role in my life, it was he that was also learning from me. My curriculum was about how to not push unbidden at boundaries that one should not cross uninvited. He was my first real lover, even though I did not have sex with him. We explored areas together where I previously would not allow anyone else access, because I knew he would stop when I said stop and go when I said go. I never fully trusted him the way that he wanted me to, for reasons that were deep, dark, and sticky. He intuitively knew something had traumatized me and wanted me to spill all the secrets of my heart to him, but I wouldn't talk about it. He was a good human, but it was his agenda that I didn't trust at that time, though I cared for him as deeply as I could. It was around the time when the mystical summer evenings felt like a bridge to forever that he invited me to go to Sachsenhausen with he and some friends. I was wearing the large, decorative 3-inch pewter cross that I picked up after my experience involving the Major. This cross adorned a white cotton flowing shirt with butterfly sleeves and a high waist that flowed down in a V over my belly and back. emphasizing my hips. The ensemble was completed with the usual tight jeans and the killer boots that my mother had given to me. I found myself alongside Elijah and his best friend Truman in old Sachsenhausen, my boots echoing through the ghostly familiar moonlit cobblestone streets that led to the Irish pub. I seemed to float in through the front entrance, not for the first time, and certainly not for the last. I absolutely loved this place. It felt like a portal into the Ireland of old to me, and I, transported there, might just encounter fairies or leprechauns around each firelit corner, dancing and swaying in the shadows. The scent was a bit musty, with a touch of ale and smoke from the fire. Long wooden tables in the main hall against the backdrop of dark brick walls offset a tiny stage, and smaller, more intimate tables in the front room at the farthest end from the fireplace. The bar was at the center of things and knew its place, a square of dark wood, like an island floating under dim lights. And behind the bar was the best thing of all, Irish bartends. I enjoyed going up to the bar and being called Love. It was my name, after all, and it was a treat to hear it in English, delivered with an Irish brogue by a handsome Irishman. "What can I get you, love?" was music to my ears, and I looked forward to it every time. We were meeting people there that I didn't know, and in the Irish pub, you never knew who you were going to meet because everyone eventually seemed to be joining in on the conversation with everyone else. Casual encounters or crossover conversations were not uncommon. The atmosphere was always magical, and this night was no different. I ended up seated at a wooden table amongst the group we were there to meet and sandwiched between another group of Irishmen. Somehow, in some way that I did not understand, I ended up sitting across from a strikingly large Irishman with a dense red beard that matched his brightly colored, long, shoulder-length red curls. I glanced sideways at Elijah, who was immersed in conversation with the people we had come to meet. So I found myself the study of this fascinating man sitting across from me, one who, except for his size and judging by the twinkle in his eyes, could have been an actual leprechaun. He was not in our group, however, and after briefly introducing himself, he asked me about the cross around my neck and why I wore it. His intention was sincere enough, and he had the gift of seeing in a way that others did not. In another situation, my jaw might have dropped, and I might have rolled my eyes under such unwanted scrutiny. This was strange and yet different. I sipped my Irish coffee, glancing again over at Elijah, who was still in deep conversation with people at the other end of the table. The Irishman's name was Michael. Fine, I thought. I'll carry on here and make polite conversation with the exceptionally large Michael who looks like an actual leprechaun to me. I told him that it was a symbol of the relationship that I had with Jesus, specifically that Jesus and I had a deal. I did not say that it was also a form of protection. Undeterred, he began asking more personal questions about what that relationship meant to me. Instead of asking him if he had several years to hear that explanation, I simply stated it was the most important thing in my life. He told me, between taking a couple drinks from his pint of Guinness, that my cross was too big and gaudy. He didn't say gaudy, but that is what he meant. He called it loud. At this point, I was thinking something along the lines of, "What are you, a sub-unit of the fashion police?" I felt unusually awkward and defended my right to wear a cross of any size of my choosing, while he explained in a way that only an Irishman can, who is currently savoring a pint of Guinness, that I was wrong about this. Again, I thought, fine, wanting to excuse myself and go to the loo or up to the bar where they would call me love and give me a free drink. Instead of bolting, I felt magnetized to stay put and listened as he explained his viewpoint. He told me that faith was an internal thing and that this relationship was sacred, and I needn't wear it like a scar on my chest for all to see. He went on further to say that instead, if I chose to wear any cross at all, that it should be small and delicate. It was at this juncture of the conversation that I finally fully engaged with him and finished his sentence for him. Because it's not the size of the cross that matters. It's the size of the heart that wears it, and the faith that this heart carries within it. Exactly, he agreed. He quietly contemplated and looked very deeply into my eyes in silence for what seemed like far too long for a polite conversation between two strangers in a pub. He was Irish after all, but this gentle staring was not a cultural difference. I had spent so many hours involved in staring contests while writing the U-Bahn that I allowed it to continue without looking away. After a long while of looking into my soul, he said, as though making a pronouncement, "You are very wise." Everything else going on in the room seemed to slow down, losing focus, like a Monet painting, blurring out as our conversation was drawn inside a sphere of light between us. Nothing that he said was expected, but this was something quite unexpected. I already felt transported to another world, as though we too were in a dimensional portal or time warp. But this statement took me completely outside of time. What? I queried, making sure that I understood him correctly. You are very wise, he stated again clearly, with a voice as rich as the Guinness he drank and sweeter than honey. He must have kissed the Blarney Stone because the gift of gab was inherent in his tone and demeanor. I wasn't sure how to respond because I had not ever encountered anyone else like him. My intuition had become very sharp and focused, so I knew that if he were being dishonest, I would sense it, and I didn't. So I agreed with him. I spoke in a failed attempt to make the conversation anything but ethereal. Yes, sure, I know that, I said, as though I was saying, yes, sure, I drink milk. It's all part of a healthy breakfast. In accordance with our tenuously agreed upon and completely obliterated not-so-polite pub talk bordering on too personal, it now bared to the bones and marrow of my soul. It surpassed being too personal and became an etheric message. No, 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 he said with clairvoyant certainty. You don't understand it yet, but you will. He went on. You don't know how wise you are yet, but you will find out. Someday you will understand, and you will remember this moment. He was right. I did remember him and the moment years later, when I saw a man in a local TV commercial who was the spitting image of him. He went on to tell me that my soul was so deep that even he who considered himself the seer of such things could not see the bottom of it or the end to it. I was revealed to his insight, and I knew it, but why was he able to see something that I could not? There, suspended in time, he described a part of me that I knew was there, but could not fathom the depth of yet. I could only feel it, and it was myself, my soul. I felt it there within me, but there were parts that I just couldn't see, that I could only perceive as a bottomless, fathomless ocean inside of me. I was filled with so much feeling that sometimes it was all I could do to make myself stay in this world. I wondered at this insightful creature sitting across from me, much like an angel sent to guide me home and telling me not to give up. You'll know in the end, he said, and you will find what you seek. Could he have been any more cryptic, I wondered. I will find what I seek? I will find what I seek? I thought, swirling his words in my mind and wrapping them around my heart. Micah looked quite serious and said, I cannot say more. It is for you to know. But when you do, it will be for us all. You have been given a special mission in this life, with an exceptionally difficult path to follow. Do not let yourself be daunted by it. You have an exceptional gift to share with the world, and you are deeply loved. Yes, I thought, tell me something I don't know, but tell me more. My dream of being on the cloud with wisdom under the blue dome of endless sky came tumbling down and was reflected in his words to me. It served to remind me of what I had to do that left me feeling completely overwhelmed. As for being deeply loved, I felt somewhat puzzled by that statement, but chose not to question him further about it. The only thing that I said in reply was, I'm a singer. I sing and write. I trailed off, thinking of the countless poems, prose, and song lyrics that I had written prolifically since moving to Germany. That's a part of it, but not all of it. There is no one else like you, he replied. That's enough of that for one night. He spoke slowly and genuinely, as though hard-pressed with the burden of knowledge and seeing what other people didn't know was there. There's no more I can tell you. It's for you, and only you. And then suddenly we descended back into the present, with the others in our respective parties at the Irish pub. We immersed ourselves in other conversations, and in due time, over the course of the evening, we each wished each other well and bade each other a good night. The conversation between myself and Michael left us both better for the meeting. I never saw him again, at least not in that way. Elijah didn't know what was spoken of between me and Michael, and was none the wiser, except for noticing the intensity of the conversation. After we left, he asked about the Irishman. What were you talking about? I gave him an uninviting, short, yet precise answer. He didn't like my cross. He said it should be smaller. I declined to discuss it any further. That seemed enough to satisfy him for the way home, where we discussed his upcoming departure, which was obviously more important in his mind than my conversation with Michael. It seemed that he and his father had agreed that he was to return to the States and attend a university there. It didn't matter which one to me, because it felt like he may as well be going to the moon. Well, at least there would be less man-drama in my life, I thought. That night, I prayed before I went to sleep, as I always did, but this time I prayed with more depth and clarity than before. I asked that I be guided by the truth, to the truth, and that I not falter. The conversation with Michael was stirring and continued to swirl in my consciousness. His words had the resonance of truth to them. His eyes had the glow of knowledge and understanding, with the twinkle of humor and love. I knew that we had been guided to meet, but it only left me with more questions and few answers. It was the latter that I needed to hear the most. Of all the things in the world that he could have said to me, he zeroed straight in on wisdom and told me that I was wise. This was an affirmation for me that continued to reveal that my dream was more than just a dream and had a profoundly real impact in my daily life. I asked wisdom to guide me home, and in my dreams, I flew to lands unknown to find the boy that I knew loved me.